Hello, friends. Welcome to the Peace and Power Ukraine podcast, a place to discuss all aspects of policy related to Ukraine. Today, we record from Kyiv, Ukraine, where Ukraine sits at the crossroads of modern history, where East meets West and freedom collides with totalitarianism. Thank you, as always, for joining us during these unprecedented times. We're going to have another great conversation today and bring more light than heat as we dig a little deeper each episode with guests from across the public policy spectrum. Today, I'm joined by Dale Armstrong, director of the Armada Network and a board member of the American Pastors Network. He brings immense expertise to our conversation today. After being 32 years in country, welcome, Dale. Welcome, my friend.
Well, thank you, Gary. This is a pleasure to be with you, and I enjoy your passion and your fervor for Ukraine. Thank you so much.
Yeah, indeed. You are a powerful example of how an American can be an advocate for Ukraine and stand with these beautiful people. And you've got perspective, again, 32 years going back from, the ashes of Soviet times to current day. And the enemy is not different. They're wearing different clothes. Draw that perspective for us as someone who's gone for 32 years and seen that unfold.
Well, I think that is an important principle to understand, that Ukraine came out of the ashes of a destroyed Soviet empire, a destroyed Soviet economy. In 1993, I would move around Ukraine and see the effects of communism, see the effects of that Marxist ideology, and then watch the society emerge out of that into something new. And for every time I hear someone criticizing where Ukraine is, oh, Ukraine is so corrupt, Ukraine is this, Ukraine is that, they have no idea the path of progress that has taken place here in those 30 years, and in particular in the last 15 years. So for whatever they want to criticize, the sad thing is, if you turn the coin, it is an amazing journey to see the roots of liberty and to sit with people and discuss those things.
Yes, absolutely. So Dale, just in this past day at the time of recording, I've been able to be on the ground here and experience some of the direct heartbreak that you experience on a daily basis. There was a tremendous attack just the night before we arrived in Kyiv, and more than 31 lives, souls were lost at one particular site, many children. And I was able to go visit that site yesterday, meet with some of the residents who had experienced the loss of friends, family. It was incredibly moving and heartbreaking. And this is something that when people in the U.S. Think that, well, Vladimir Putin is a rational actor, how do we understand thinking about him as some rational actor, yet his rationality leads to directly targeting innocent civilians as a psychological strategy? How is that rational? Help us understand that level of, it really just seems like evil to me.
Well, I think you nailed it right there with the word evil. And I think in our comfortable society in America, we see bad things happen, but we don't perhaps recognize that evil is real. And I think it's very parallel to what took place in Europe in 36 through 39, when there was this reality check that Herr Hitler was not as nice as he was portraying himself. And the mask has to come off of Putin. Thank God we're seeing a little bit of a pendulum swing when we talk about policy, because Putin is not going to back down. He is an evil, vicious animal, and he's bent on death and destruction. I know when President Trump took his second administration, people were asking me, what did I think he was going to do? And did I have faith that President Trump was going to deal with Ukraine in a manner that's something I would agree with, something worthy. And the point I made at the time was it doesn't really matter at this moment where they stand, the Trump administration in policy, because I have absolute faith that Putin will not change and that I understand his intent. He is evil and he cannot be consoled. He needs to be stopped.
Yeah, I think you're right. The President Trump has come to that clear realization. He tried to offer carrots to bring about a ceasefire, and Putin's shown no interest so far. And now it's going to become more steel from the American administration to grab his attention, to stop these barbaric acts. I just want to illustrate a little bit more what I saw. When one of these missiles hits, it blasts a hole in these apartment buildings. We saw drapes and clothing blasted out of the apartment buildings, strewn into the tree branches.
Yeah.
We saw children's stuffed animals blown apart and blasted into the surrounding area. 31 lives. The rubble has to be dug out of. These scenes are just absolutely atrocious and catastrophic.
See, this also goes to policy, Gary, where right now we're in a phase of stronger sanctions, whether that be fiscal or oil. And the point is, Americans don't understand the Soviet mentality towards their own people. They don't care about their economy. They've already centralized it. It's going to run. They don't care how much their people suffer. Putin does not care about those children that makes you and I weep. And it's most people can't wrap their minds around it, but you saw it.
Right. Tell me about the psychology of the Ukrainian people as they suffer and deal with this on a daily basis. In talking with people, when the air alerts go off, I had some people that just say, hey, I ignore this now. I had one person tell me, I've just decided to delete the app from my phone. I have to continue on with life.
Right.
I sense still the average Ukrainian looks at their phone, does an analysis about what type of weapon has been launched, where it's headed, how much time they have, and then they make a decision from there on whether they bother to go to a shelter or some safer place or not. Is this normal now? Is this the regularity? And is this where your mind is at too, as you try to live life here under daily regular missile attacks?
And everyone, to me, it's very interesting because everyone respects the other's choice. Back in 22, when the full-scale invasion began, and please remind your audience that the war started in 2014.
Exactly.
This has been going on for a long time. But in 22, with the full-scale invasion, every air raid was really nerve-wracking. And you watched as the years passed, literally, how people accommodate and make their own decisions. Since 22, I've been in one air raid shelter. But when you talk to someone else, they're not offended, and you're not offended at them if they're there every night, particularly when they have young family or children or even the proximity. So it is very interesting to see how people deal with it. Most places now, if you're in a cafe, I'm sure you observed it many times, the air raid will go off and no one even stops eating. They just continue to move forward. They're incredibly resilient people. It's breathtaking to watch sometimes.
Yeah, it really is. I just went through my third night here. There was an air alert at some point, and I ended up, after being here for 4 nights in country, decided I'm just going to continue to sleep. And that was a decision I made.
Well, you're hitting something that always makes me laugh. You watch all these war movies, and there's no war movie that shows you the reality that people don't sleep. And when you've gone 5 years with no sleep, it's really strange.
Right. And it has to. That's part of the psychological warfare that they're trying to unleash on the people. And there is a little bit of this joie de vivre and joy of life, or the Jewish l'chaim that the people have just embraced, I think, and we have to move on. We have to enjoy every moment of life we have, no matter what we're in the face of. Some people would say, well, that's a dark perspective. I view it the other way.
No, I
I saw
agree.
people all over the streets just loving life and enjoying. I walked the city for miles and miles, kilometers here, kilometers and kilometers last night. It was a path that my good friend Dale Armstrong had once taken
Oh
me
yeah,
on my
that's
first
right.
trip to Key.
That's right.
And I took some others on that path last night. And I saw the city alive. It was just incredible. The streets were as busy as New York City.
It's incredible. It really is. In 22, when I came and was president here, I cried every day. And then eventually you can't cry anymore, and there's this strange numbness, right? And about a year passed, and a member of parliament and a active officer in the military who had been in the fighting in Bucha and Irpin took me on a personal tour of Bucha and Irpin, where such horrific death and destruction was dealt out. And Gary, it was a year later. Streets were swept clean. It was like going to Gettysburg in the United States and looking for a bullet hole. So much had been cleaned up. And I remember walking on the side of the street, and there are children playing. And it had been probably a year since I'd broke down and cried.
Yeah.
But seeing the joy, the life, the resilience of the people, it was amazing. Really a testament.
It is truly something to behold. And you wonder what you would do in your own country if something like this happened. How would the Americans respond? Would we have the same resolve and steel that the Ukrainian people have had? Their will is outstanding. They just want the weapons to fight this war. They're not asking for American blood to be spilled here on their soil.
Yeah.
They're asking to be armed, and they'll continue to fight.
And I think Americans would, Gary. And I think that's also something to press in policy issues when they want to give away Crimea. They want to give away Donbass. If someone invaded and captured Florida, would you really give it away? Or are you an American? And sometimes we don't think about this because it goes into the psychological fiber of every man and woman on the street out here.
Yeah, the Russians control about 19 to 20% of Ukraine's territory, and put that in U.S. terms, think about 19 to 20% of our country. Would we just give it away and look the other way willingly? So that's going to be a difficult part of this process. If we can ever get the real negotiations, or at minimum a first step ceasefire. I'm hearing from leaders that there still remain very deep concerns about energy infrastructure and how to survive the next winter. It's August now, and already conversations have to be had thinking about how to get through next winter when these drone storms, the big groups of drones, can all come together on one energy site to try to destroy energy. You have 6 nuclear reactors in the country providing a lot of energy. One, Zaporizhia, which is under the Russian control. But even while they're producing great energy, the distribution networks can be attacked.
Exactly.
So does that really remain a top concern? There's a lot of concerns, but how to get through that winter?
Well, I think it'll be whomever you talk to as to where it's on the priority list. It certainly is a priority. At the same time, the resilience of the people to endure a hard winter is incredible. Now, I think it's also a testimony of the grace of God. The last several winters have been very mild, which I think chaps Putin off, and I think makes God smile. But it can get bad here. It can get very, very cold. So it's a dilemma. However, I think that again goes to understanding the resilience of Ukrainian people. I'll give you an example that greatly impacted me. I was visiting the city of Zaporozhye recently. Now, Zaporozhye is, and still is, about 20 miles from the fighting line. So you have an active city, every night people out on the streets, restaurants, children going to school. That's 20 miles away from active fighting, and a large contingent of Russian forces. What they have done is incredible, and on your next trip you need to visit. They have built 4 new schools underground, 3 stories below the ground. so that the children can go to school without the interruptions. One school does 500 children at a time, and they do 2 shifts a day. And when you walk down 3 flights of steps and enter into this, you don't even realize you're underground. And there's children laughing and running in the hall. I mean, that also made me cry.
Yeah.
But the principal of the superintendent of the entire project told me that within the year, 20 miles from the fighting, Gary, they had 2,000 families return from Europe and sign their children up to go to school.
Wow. That is tremendous. That just shows the spirit of the people. They're willing to live that close to the fighting.
Willing to come back. And I know not all of them are. That's another priority. It's a problem. Ukraine has been bled dry of population. But
that's signs of hope.
Yeah.
I want to connect back to my visit yesterday to this terrible site of death and destruction. I talked to one resident, and directly next to where the collapsed apartment building was, there's a construction site. And at that site, they are building an underground school.
Oh.
There's an above ground school that all the windows were blown out when this missile attack happened. And right next to it is if that site, the missile crossed over that site.
Yeah.
And landed maybe only 20 yards from the construction fence that's around it. The local resident I talked to, he looked at me and said, well, how does this make sense? Why us? Why did Putin's military
What targeting
choose
genius
us?
picked that? Yeah.
Were they targeting and trying to send a message about this new underground school that we can still reach you before it's done, before you have safety?
Very good possibility. Are you
this is
aware? I forget the statistics, but there are thousands of Ukrainian schools that have been destroyed. And it's just beyond the freak element of chance. You can't plead chance.
Right.
This goes to that vile, evil, strategy that's in Putin's brain.
Right.
They're killing children deliberately, Gary.
Yeah, it really is heartbreaking, and that's not to mention the thousands and thousands of children that have been abducted from the occupied territories. Our own research entity, Yale Labs, recently updated their numbers and said they don't think it's just 19 or 20,000 children. They believe it's 35,000. But then when I visited with Save Ukraine here yesterday, they said that also what's happening in the occupied territories is every child is being registered with the Russian administration in those areas, and there's other processes that are beginning to Russify them and strip their Ukrainian cultural heritage. And that's already 700,000 children that are behind enemy lines.
Yeah.
Is this something that you're familiar with and have perspective on that you could add?
Well, my good friend Mukola Kuleba is the expert. He's the go-to man.
He hosted us, and it was just incredible.
And I'm sure you've got footage, and I really would promote what he says and wouldn't even dare attempt to remember the statistics that he lives with. And he has been at it for, I think, 11 years, dealing with the children and the issues here involved.
Let me give you hopeful numbers. When we were there visiting with him, they had rescued 6 more children the day before. They are up to 742 rescued children.
Isn't that incredible? And if you knew the stories behind some of them, it's almost every one could be a movie.
Right.
It really is.
It's a modern day underground railroad.
Yes.
And you have that type of story that's happening.
Yeah.
I could go on and on with stories, but we should turn our attention to policy a little bit. What do you see as you see the headlines unfolding here? How is the morale of the Ukrainian people as they now see the pivot of this American president and administration back towards being anti-Russia in particular and anti-Putin after he's just strung us along for so long? How do you see the morale of the American people, of the Ukrainian people back towards American policy?
Well, they're hopeful. Obviously, it's painfully slow. And this pendulum swing, and I'm very, very grateful that I believe not only is Mr. Trump thinking differently, he's listening to different people. and I know friends of mine in the state, friends of mine in Pentagon, are all kind of echoing that. There are great, great minds in D.C. who understand how relevant Ukraine is. And the switch is beginning to change from Ukraine is an American problem to Russia's the problem, Ukraine's the answer. And with that, Ukraine is just saying, give us the weapons to fight. It's their manpower. You know, it's not American boys dying on the battlefield, which our Speaker of the House, that's one of the things that made him flip and promote Ukraine. He has a son. It's not his son that's going to be in this battle. And the Ukrainians are fine with that. You know, just conversations I had just 2 days ago, that there's a very well-established businessman. He got called up. He kissed his wife, and he's on the way to the battlefield. You know, I don't know if it's the first time he's held a rifle, but he's going to defend his country. There are those that have run away, but there's those who just need the weapons to get the job done. And all of that plays in policy to this greater spectrum of Putin building a 1,000,000-man army. You know, there's several different strategists I've talked to that they believe the Ukraine wasn't conquered quickly because the whole principle was for Putin to build his army under the watchful eye of the West, as the West let them do it. And people in America perhaps don't understand Ukraine is about 700,000 battle-hardened soldiers. And that's to a force multiplier of about 10 over a raw recruit. NATO only has 300,000, Gary. NATO came out with a report. It'd take them 4 months to spin up enough soldiers to face Putin. It's not just a Ukraine issue. It's a European issue. And I think that's some of what Trump is beginning to recognize globally. Certainly I understand, and Ukrainians talk to me about it. They say, we realize there's Taiwan and China. We realize there's Israel and Iran, but they want to fight and survive.
Very good. As we begin to close out, I did want to make sure we hit this topic, and I know you've been watching this unfold. There are American mouthpieces, especially on the center-right conservative, so-called conservative side, that have been incredibly pro-Russian and sympathetic. You know, the Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens of the world. I believe, and I've seen them in many ways jump the shark, not just on this issue, but some other issues where their voices have really decreased recently because they've just gone so far into a lot of conspiracy theories.
Yeah.
Even President Trump, slapped down Tucker Carlson during his Iran policy decisions. So with that being said, I feel like some other voices on the center-right have increased, and we just saw Ben Shapiro come to Kyiv and have impact. How do you view that unfolding here, and how are the Ukrainian people again seeing that? Are they seeing some more American voices come by their side and being stronger?
Well, as you've been here, I think they're very gracious to every host. And I think they recognize that it's more powerful if you can impact an influential individual than perhaps an op-ed in a rag in the United States. Mm-hmm. And for Ben Shapiro to come, I believe, was a great victory for Ukraine because he continues to talk about the things that impacted him. And that's why we feel it's very important to bring over journalists and editors and TV producers, even actors. I know early on Sean Penn was over here when things began. I'd like to see more of that, and if anyone's listening and you're interested in coming, you let me know. We will meet you at the airport, and we will give you a VIP service, as Gary's well aware of.
Yeah,
so
that is great, and that's an important offer. As we round out the discussion, if there's one thing that you didn't get to share, that you didn't get to say, and maybe it's more about the Armada Network and what you're doing, what might that be as you leave the conversation today?
I would say, real quick, two things. One is do pray for Ukrainian pastors. The Armada Network does one very simple thing, and that is we empower Ukrainian pastors who are here. I've known many of them for 30 years. They know the back roads in the woods. And what we empower them to do are evacuations, which are incredible stories like Hacksaw Ridge, Gary. These guys just keep going back in and bringing people out. We do medical deliveries and resupply hospitals that have been in reclaimed territories where people can't get to it. And we deliver food. We actually, the pastors, I'm talking about the pastors.
Yes.
We actually create bakeries. We go into these areas that have been destroyed and we have a truck and semis and we start bakeries. That would be one thing. Please pray for Ukrainian pastors and help us empower them. The second thing is back to the Tucker Carlsons of the world is America needs to wake up and realize that war is not just here in Ukraine. The war is on many, many fronts, and one of them is an information war. And we're not really well prepared to recognize that ideologies and information that comes through many, many different channels should be suspect. The propaganda that Putin is engaging in is at such high levels, Gary, which makes it the potential of a global war.
Well, thank you, Dale Armstrong, for being with us today. Thank you for the impact that you're having, being an advocate for the Ukrainian people and coming alongside, especially church leaders here in Ukraine. It is inspiring, and thank you to our audience for listening to these important conversations. We're going to continue on this. We have so much to share from our time here in Kyiv over the coming months. You're going to continue to hear more great conversations and from great leaders like Dale, who inspire me each and every day to continue to go forward. So thank you all, and God bless.